Okay, so we've had now a second attempt on the life of Mr. Donald J. Trump. And the thing that I wanted to address today is all of these people around us who are trying to make a case that somebody somehow somewhere in our government is not involved in this whole thing. And I think that even it doesn't matter what side of the aisle is speaking. It seems like nobody thinks that there's anybody that is at all responsible for any of this stuff going on, except for maybe the rhetoric that's being used. And of course, I think that it's possible that that has something to do with it. But there's also a lot of theories about the idea that there's somebody in the government who is organizing these assassination attempts. And it may be far-fetched. It might be. But what if it's not? And I know that it's difficult sometimes to speak in what ifs. But what if it's not? I mean, to what lengths will our government go to push a narrative? To what lengths will the United States government go to get us to think, say, or do whatever it is that they want? We are in unprecedented times right now. And I don't think that we should take anything off the table. I don't think that we should discount any possibility. I mean, for example, and we may have talked about this already, but for example, let's take the eating of cats and dogs, right? The whole world seemingly started to laugh at Donald Trump when he said this. It wasn't long ago that I saw a video of a Jamaican man who I believe is now living in Florida, somewhere in the U.S., who was explaining that Haitian people use what we consider household pets, such as cats and dogs, and other small animals, as things to sacrifice for their religion being voodoo, and then using the bones for these voodoo rituals that they have. And he also talked about how they're not shy to talk about it. In fact, they're proud of their history. They're proud of their heritage. This is where they come from. And so that would tell me that it's absolutely plausible that these things are happening. We're hearing from the community that these types of things are happening. We're hearing from people who have firsthand knowledge that these things are possible and, in fact, do happen. But yet the mainstream media will have you believe that this man is a laughingstock for talking about this. And maybe at the end of the day, he is a laughingstock for talking about this. But again, I ask you, what if he's not wrong? What lengths will the government go to get us to say and think and do what it is they want us to do? And I think those are questions that we should all be asking ourselves. Would the government openly poison United States citizens to scare them off from doing something or to kill them off one way or another? Many would say no. The government isn't gonna resort to killing us. They're not going to kill us off. It's not possible. Well, they did it during the Prohibition. They certainly had no problem doing it then, in the 20s. The United States government, to try to get people to give up alcohol, poisoned it. They poisoned alcohol and then let it go out the doors to be delivered to the American people in hopes that when they drink said alcohol, they will be sick, they will be next to death. Many even died from the poisoning, to get them to not want the taste for alcohol. They knew it was a risk. They knew it was a risk that people were going to die. But that was the decision that they made. Pretty extreme, if you ask me. I think that we could all agree, no matter what your political beliefs are, I think we could all agree that that's a little extreme. But I think it's a perfect example of what we have going on today. Think about what else was going on during Prohibition. Anyone that spoke about it was silenced. Bootleggers arrested. The corruption was rampant. The police were all bought. The Prohibition officials all compromised, paid off by the organized crime syndicates. It's kind of weird how that same type of mentality seems to be happening today. And I'm not trying to say that we're in, like, this is some kind of plan that the government has to recreate Prohibition. But I think it's a sign of how things go. I mean, look at the pandemic. It's my belief that the vaccine is not good for us. The government was giving us something that's not good for us in hopes to get us to think, say, and do whatever the narrative is that they pushed. And I think there's a lot of evidence to show that whatever narrative they were trying to push is not necessarily true. In fact, I don't believe it's true at all. But that's my opinion. So that's the reason why I didn't partake in any of that bullshit. But there's a lot of things that are similar to the 20s. Nowadays, anybody that spoke about their feelings about the pandemic or the shot or government corruption, any of the other big what-to-dos that we've had, the laptop, the briefcase, Russian collusion, all this stuff. You're silenced. The narrative doesn't fit whatever they say it should fit. So you were silenced, much like Prohibition. If you weren't touting Prohibition and whatever it was that they were, the message they were trying to get along, you were silenced or you were demonized or whatever word it is you want to use. I just find it interesting. The same things are happening now. And we have folks in our communities that are just stuck in their little bubbles and they don't want to leave, they don't want to go anywhere. So, one can't help but identify these things because these events keep happening. How many more times does Trump have does his life have to be threatened? How many more times do just Sue and Tom sitting on the couch watching TV and they can pick out the inconsistencies in the Secret Service? The United States Secret Service, they can pick it out, just sitting on the couch, and who knows what they do, but they're just blue-collar workers. How many more of these style events are going to happen before everyday Americans just lose their complete and utter trust and faith in this tradition, this very elite group of law enforcement officers that we call the United States Secret Service? How elite can they be? I will say this. The guy that spotted a gun barrel at 300 yards away coming out of some thick foliage, that guy should be commended. And I'm sure we've heard that already. By the time this video is out into the space, we've heard all about this. But let me just echo and mimic. That guy deserves a lot of stuff because that's pretty amazing. But I think the whole point is that none of that should have happened in the first place. The guy shouldn't have been there for that long. He shouldn't have been able to hunker down in a golf course. Where are we as a country that one of the most protected men in the world, one of the most protected people in the world, can't even play a round of golf without a potential assassination attempt happening on his life? Furthermore, an ex-U.S. president, and we're also in a place in this country where people, United States citizens, whether you supported him or not, whether you like him or you don't, we still have United States citizens that are okay with him potentially being assassinated. That say things like, well, he should stop talking the way he talks. He's asking for it. That's where we're at. It's really difficult for me to be able to talk to anybody who may or may not be from somewhere else in this world and tell them how great we are, how great of a country we are, how great America is, when we have Americans that are just cool with the fact that our last president is is being targeted for assassination twice. In what, 2 months? Is this going to be the norm? Is Donald Trump going to have to dodge a bullet once a month for the rest of his life? Or is he going to have to wait until his last term in office is over? I mean, holy cow. I'll tell you what. Barack Obama was not my favorite president. In fact, I think he had and still does have a huge hand in some of the catastrophes that we have going on in this country, like his health care plan. Just one example. But I would never, ever support anybody killing the man. I mean, that's a whole different level of dysfunction that I don't believe any of us as Americans really want to have out there in the open. How can we as a country talk about how great we are when we're supporting the assassination of our ex-leaders? Not to mention that this particular ex-leader is the front runner for the highest seat in the land. Potentially the most powerful person on the planet. Are we that wrapped up in all this politics? Are we that wrapped up in all these words? I mean, is all of it worth killing the man over? I don't know. Maybe for some it is. For me, it's not. I don't get it. I don't understand. But I think that we are at a place where we need to decide as a country, as a group of people, take out the politics. We need to decide where it is that we want to be. As a country, where do we come together? At what point do we stop all the foolishness and come together, at least just a little bit? At this point, I don't know how we ever have agreements ever again. I would like to think that I'm 1,000% wrong about this, but if you just look at what's going on around you and just the disaster of a country we have going on right now. The other day I was scrolling X, and this some X page about like hood fights or something came up, and it was just a bunch of videos of people fighting in the streets, and it's just insane. It's just insane how angry these people are at each other, and for what? I don't know, I think I watched two of them and I switched off to something else, but holy cow. What are we doing, folks? And how did we get here? And I know that, like, Jason and I have had this conversation before. I don't know if we've had it on the show, but we've certainly had it together at some point. Like, how did we get here? And it seems like it all started coming this direction when Donald Trump announced he was running and came down that escalator. That was the beginning of the downfall of our country. And at first it was, well, nobody thought he could win. Absolutely nobody's going to take this guy serious, right? And then he started gaining traction and he started building a head of steam, and then holy crap, he won. And then he started talking about the swamp and how he was going to drain it. And I think people got scared. And then the attacks start. And they haven't stopped since. And so when I really stop to think about all of this, I think about things like that. Like these people, and when I say these people, I don't mean anybody specific, because it seems to be both sides of the aisle. It seems to be people close to him. It seems to be people far away from him, removed. They haven't stopped trying to bury this guy since just before he became president. And if they actually had all this dirt on Donald Trump and any of these things that they said about him were just a little bit true, wouldn't they have found something by now? I mean, sure, he's been convicted. He got convicted of some crime, but in my opinion, it was some bullshit conviction. That one in particular was a headhunt. They were headhunting that guy. And I believe that any of these other ones he was found guilty, that he'll win on appeal. He'll win the big one on appeal too. But all these other cases about like Russian collusion and disinformation and all these things where they started calling him a threat to democracy, an existential threat to our democracy. Once all that stuff started, and they started prosecuting him based on that dumb shit, they haven't won a case. And so after all this time, you would think that the man would be sitting in prison for the rest of his life. But nope. He just keeps going. And still, for the life of me, I don't understand why. I mean, how many times does he got to get shot at? How many times does he have to be rushed into some room or some vehicle and swept away because there's a gunman out there looking at him? And now he's a guy that's he's gone too far to turn back. He's just going to do it, I believe. I guess what I'm looking for, what I'm looking to say is, when are we as a community, as a country, gonna show any type of cohesiveness? When are we going to do anything that's for the benefit of our neighbor? Even if we don't necessarily agree with our neighbor, even if we don't necessarily care for our neighbor. Because after all, we are Americans. November 12th of 2001, you didn't care what side of the aisle your neighbor was on. The 13th, you didn't care. The 14th, you didn't care. 15th, maybe you started to care a little more again. But we need to find something to bring us together, and it doesn't need to be some kind of tragedy. It doesn't need to be some terrorist attack. It doesn't need to be some kind of upheaval. We have enough upheaval. We've all had enough upheaval in our lives in the last few years. And I think that people such as I and Jason and Ty and other veterans in this country, looking at all this through that lens, it becomes even more frustrating. It becomes even more frustrating because it makes you now question your service, and it makes you now question why you chose to do what you do. And with the understanding that we still chose that path. But for the people that chose that path because there was a call to service, because they had a sense of patriotism, 9/11 happened and they thought, well, this is some bullshit. I want to get in on this. And then they did. They did get in on this. And I don't think anybody ever really thought that in a very short time, in a very few amount of years, we would be in a place like we're at now. We'd be in a place where the sacrifice, the blood, sweat, and tears that were spent and spilt for what we loved about home were not in vain. They weren't a waste. Yeah, it was a job. It was a path we chose. But it was a noble path. It was a path that was about something bigger than yourself. But I think the frustration comes in when you start to ask yourself why. I think you start to ask yourself, why did I sacrifice? Why did I sacrifice my youth? Why did I sacrifice my health? And for some, why did I sacrifice my limbs? And then, of course, why did I sacrifice everything? Unfortunately, the guys and gals that sacrificed everything don't get to verbalize their question because they're dead. But we get to verbalize their question. Their question lives on in us. And I gotta say, I don't know that I have a good answer. Today, anyway. A few years ago, I did. I hope to have a good answer in the near future, whatever that holds. It's just disappointing. It's disappointing to pick a path for yourself, knowing that the path that you're walking had been walked by a lot of great people, by great men, by outstanding women, by fantastic people that knew that this would all be worth it, or at least thought that it would all be worth it. That thought, you know what? No matter what the outcome, we can't fail. We can't lose. Because the story will live on. The idea that we're fighting for will always live on. The question is, how big and how powerful will it be? But the times in which America was super strong will never die. Those stories will live on forever. Unfortunately, the stories of a weak America, like I believe we may be seeing now, those will also live on for quite a while. I hope that we can get to a place where veterans in this country can look at what's happening around them. Look at the TV, look at the internet, read the news, hear the news, talk to people, and feel like their service was worth it, and feel not only accomplished but be proud. Because I think that we're at a place where not a lot of them are very proud. Not when we look out and see what kind of things this country is standing on right now. And we're not standing on a whole lot of business. At least honest, meaningful business anyway. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. That came across my mind yesterday, and I just kind of have been thinking about it this whole time. And just ask yourself, how far will the government go? How far will the government go to get you to do and think and say whatever it is they want, how will they use you to do the exact same thing? And are you willing to play the game? Good night.